Welcome to 90 Days to Pro VGM Composer Workflow. Before we jump into the meat of this course, which is really based around the gear and the workflow portion of using DAWs and creating templates, I think it is best and it will serve you best if we first start by focusing on our rhythms. So by rhythms, I'm referring to our schedule. These are our annual, quarterly, monthly, weekly, and daily habits that actually cause the change and cause the work inside of our lives to get done. So in my experience, having done this career now for over 15 years as a professional, I've learned the hard way that early on in my career, I used to try to do everything, and it was very haphazard, and I never really got much done. But as soon as I started putting these items into my calendar and prioritizing them, specifically starting with the annual and then working all the way down to the daily, I noticed a shift into hyper productivity. And for me, the biggest change was when I had kids, of all things. I was married, but as soon as we started having kids, and if you know my story with foster children and with adopted children and then biological children, we had a house full very quickly. And so there was a fire lit underneath me that I had to figure this out. I had to learn how to work hyper productively inside a very short amount of time. And now, years later, after establishing these rhythms, I average somewhere between 20 and 25 work hours per week. And on average, I take usually about 2 months off from work just throughout the year for vacations and holidays and family time. So it's a really nice setup. It's a really good deal. But in order to be that level of productive, there are certain things I have to do and put in my calendar as the priority. And that's what I want to talk through here today. So for example, some things that you might want to consider for your annual rhythms might be reviewing your previous year finances. This is something that I do at the beginning of the year in January, as I take a look at the entire last year's budget, the income and the expenses. I do this both for business and for personal, but this is really important for business because you have to know, what did you actually earn last year? What did you profit? Or were you negative? Because you need to know where you're progressing or not. You also need to plan ahead for your next year goals. Again, this is one of those reasons that doing this in January is really helpful because we already have this spirit of the new year, and it's really nice to sit down and actually write down tangible goals. We're going to earn this much money doing these things. What exactly are you going for? And as a video game composer, you might actually want to write down, I'm going to work with 2 paying clients this year, or I'm going to sell X $1,000 through video game music packs. Whatever it is, you need to have very clear goals, and this is the time to do it. And then you need to schedule out all of your major events for that year. So these are conferences, holidays, vacations. I can't tell you how many times that I've had to say no to so many opportunities in work, whether that's game projects or that's creating products or just doing collaborations and interviews, because I already had these sacred dates set aside. I already had the vacation days, the holidays, the family time. That stuff was already set in stone. So when an opportunity came 3 months later, 6 months later, it was an easy no because I already had the most important things scheduled out. So some quarterly rhythms you might want to consider: paying your taxes. Now, this is one of those things that I would recommend, especially once you build a business, and we'll dive more into this in future courses around business building. But you need to have some kind of accountant or a bookkeeper in your business, because ultimately this is someone that is going to check twice and make sure that everything is accounted for. This is not an area you want to mess up in. Believe me, I've messed up in this before. You also want to consider checking your website analytics. So these would be things like your website traffic, your lead magnets, your social media. So this is something that is so easy to forget about because often we set up a lead magnet and we leave it alone forever. Or we create a website and we never update it. Or we create our social media accounts, but we're never active on it. Or we don't quite know what worked and what didn't. So having these quarterly check-ins is very powerful just to make sure, hey, yes, what I'm doing is working. Or no, this is not working at all. I'm not getting any sales. I'm not getting any views. So maybe I should change it or focus on the things that are working more. You might also want to consider on a quarterly rhythm adjusting your sales copy. So this would be your website, your video game music packs, your email campaigns. So anything that you have out really online that the public can access if they search your name, it needs to be updated. So it's really awkward when your latest credit online is something you did 5 years ago, because that instantly makes you not super viable or active in the industry and people don't want to work with you. Or if your last sale on a video game music pack was 2 years ago, it doesn't really feel great for someone shopping on your site or shopping on your marketplace if they see that your last review was 2 years ago, right? Because all of a sudden you're no longer current. And so this is where adjusting your sales copy to be more current and updated is very important. Some monthly rhythms you might want to consider. A budget meeting with your spouse. Now, not all of you are married, not all of you have a partner, but a budget meeting is something on the monthly rhythm that you absolutely should be doing as a business owner, because you have to know what are you earning and what's going out the door. And what can you do to adjust that? What are some expenses that you can cut? Or what are some other ways that you can add some side hustles to increase your income to meet those needs? It's not all about just surviving, because if you're always surviving, you're never going to grow. You have to be thinking beyond your basic needs, and you need to be thinking, okay, I need to be saving a certain percentage, or I need to be investing in this software, or I need to be thinking about this gear. And that's why in our next video, we'll be talking a little bit more about the gear side of things. You should be saving up for those things. It should not be a sporadic purchase. Save up, but this is what budgeting is all about. On a monthly rhythm, you should be paying your bills. I think that's a pretty obvious one. But it's amazing as composers, specifically as artists, we can sometimes just put our head in the sand and write our music, but forget about the most important things. And I promise you, even A-list composers struggle with this. Here within Video Game Music Alliance, we've had multiple chats with A-list composers in the game space who, even at the highest level, they still hate sending invoices and following up with clients. Who doesn't, right? That's not a fun part of the job, but you still have to do it. And that's the thing, is you need to put this in your calendar that once a month you're going to pay team members, you're going to invoice clients, you're going to pay your bills. That way it's done. And so for me, usually on the 15th of every month, that's when boom, 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 I take one whole day and I knock it all out, and then it's done. And then I can come back the next month. I don't have to worry about it. Some weekly rhythms you might consider. Budget balancing. In the monthly rhythms, we talked about the power of having a monthly budget so that every month at the start of the month, you are setting on paper what your income is and what your expenses are. That way, there's no surprises, or at least there's as few surprises as possible, in which case you might pull from your savings to pay for something. But a budget balance is the idea of on the weekly, you are checking up on it. Now, I would not put this on the daily rhythm because that's going to drive you insane. If you're constantly looking at your numbers every single day and refreshing the bank account and looking for the money, that's going to drive you crazy. It's going to put you in anxiety mode. So instead, I would suggest on the weekly. And the biggest thing, the reason we want to do this is there have been so many times where I've caught either some potential fraudulent scammy kind of things going on, or some charges that I wasn't expecting, or something like maybe like an annual purchase I forgot about last year just pulled, and thousands of dollars just pulled out and I totally forgot about it. If I had found out about those things a month later, it would have been too late to do something about it. So checking every single week is a really nice rhythm because it allows you to stay on top of your income and your expenses. And then you can follow up with clients. For example, if they said they're going to pay by certain dates, it gives them a little margin, and then you can follow up with them and you can check it the next week. Another thing you might want to consider for weekly is planning the following week schedule by the hour. So no blank spots in your schedule. And this is really the biggest secret, if there is one, to hyper productivity. It's the idea of planning out every hour of your workday for the whole work week in advance. That way, if any new opportunities come, it's an easy no, or you're going to have to move something to the following week to make sure that it still gets done. There is some level of flexibility here. We don't have to be so intense with it, but by having a plan, you will actually get stuff done. And part of this planning is choosing work days as well as rest days, meeting days, family days. I'm a big believer. As a Christian, I believe in a Sabbath day, which is a rest day. So that means one day per week. That is a day that I do not work. That is a family day. That's a rest day. We try not to even go shopping. We try not to go do activities. We're just at home resting. We're reading, playing video games, watching movies, go playing in the yard, going to the park, just good family days to rest. And I think that's super important. And regardless of what you believe, I think that there is an incredible pull on our society that you're supposed to work every single day. But I would argue that we are created to work hard and then to rest hard. Some daily rhythms you want to consider: focusing on only 1 to 2 tasks per workday for hyperproductivity. This is something I struggle with all the time because my to-do lists are a mile long. If you could see over here, I literally have stacks and stacks of sticky notes and notes of to-do lists. That's insane, right? And it's, organized chaos. It's a bunch of chaos in a pile. It's one of those things that I have to create spaces in my life, which is why we're talking about these rhythms. About once a year, I have to pull away for about a month just to get my head clear. And that's when I will go through my stacks, and it's kind of like a spring cleaning where I go through all of my notes and I throw away anything I'm not going to actually do, but then it gives me an opportunity to actually focus on the things I am going to do. So even though I have dozens and dozens of to-dos on my list, I really can only truly do about 1 or 2 things per workday that actually matter. And everything else just doesn't matter. I shouldn't do it. So I tried to do these in blocks of 2 to 3 hours. And since my workday is roughly 6 hours, I will do 2 things that are about 3 hours, or one big thing, like right now, recording a lot of videos in one sitting. That's a very good use of my workday for 6 hours to knock out a bunch of work. So it's just a different way of thinking about it. It's much more bulk in nature. So if I'm going to write music, I'm going to sit down for 3 hours and work on a whole minute of music, or I'm going to do 2 sessions of 3 hours, maybe work on 2 different pieces of music to give myself some variety. There's different ways you can do this, or you can maybe spend the morning on music and the afternoon in admin work or meetings. You got to find a balance that works for your energy levels, that is sustainable. Emails. Emails is something I have a very unpopular opinion on, and that is, I think you should only check email once, maybe twice per day. And it should be a scheduled time of the day. And when you really shouldn't check email? Beginning of the day, the beginning of your workday. Because what happens when you check an email is it instantly puts you into anxiety mode. And what it does is it's giving your best time to other people instead of to yourself, instead of to your business. So there's nothing wrong with checking email, but I would advise you to start your workday. Since you've already planned out your week, start by doing the most important thing first. For me, it's usually writing and music. So I will spend that first 3 hours I don't even look at anything else. I just know that today I'm working on this one thing. I'll spend 3 hours hyper-focused, knock it out. And then typically, but for me, that's around lunchtime. I have a nice little lunch break, and then I'll come back. And by that point, my brain's kind of, exhausted anyway. Creatively. So I'm ready for some admin work, for some meetings, that kind of thing. So by that point, I'll check email, and there's a lot of emails there because they've stacked up since yesterday that time. And then I can go through and answer the ones I need to, delete what I don't need to. I have an assistant, so I'll push things that need to go to him. But by doing this in one bulk action, I'm taking away the temptation to constantly check, and to respond. Even if you were to do this successfully, by responding one at a time in these little 5-minute blocks, you're actually disrupting the focus on what you're supposed to be doing. So I highly recommend email being something that you save for once a day, and you should probably do the same with your social media. Social media notifications can absolutely destroy your life. In fact, right now, obviously recording a video, I have do not disturb on my phone, but this is what I do just about every day anyway, is I have my phone because if my wife calls, if a kid needs me, cool, I'm going to be available, but that sucker is just sitting over there. I'm not looking at it. So if an email comes in, I'm not going to look at it. If a text comes in, I might look at it, but typically not. But by having it on Do Not Disturb, I don't have social notifications or emails or anything distracting me from the main thing I need to do. But then I will pull away, I'll take breaks, and I'll look at my phone to make sure everyone in my world is good, and we'll go from there. But by turning off the distractions, it allows you to focus, truly hyper-focus on what you're supposed to be doing. Last but not least, reminders and timers. The greatest thing I ever did for myself in the realm of productivity was I started setting reminders on my phone. What this does is it removes leaving these rhythms to chance. Because there's no way, everything we just talked about, from the annual to quarterly to monthly to weekly to daily, there's no way that you're just going to remember to do them all. It's too much. So instead, by setting reminders on your phone or an app or whatever you need to work, or maybe on paper, right? By having these recurring rhythms, having reminders to do them is so helpful, because as soon as it's out of your head, you can actually free up your mind to think of new business ideas, to think of your music and how to improve it. You can actually start to problem solve the things you need to be focused on. But if we're constantly trying to hold on to these thoughts of, oh yeah, I was supposed to get oil in my car. Oh yeah, I was supposed to go grocery shopping. Oh yeah, I was supposed to do laundry. I was supposed to, right? That just plagues us, and our brains are so full that we can't actually focus on anything. So by having some sort of reminders in your life at appropriate times that make sense for you, that's going to be super helpful. And my last tip here today is to stay on track with the times you've already set aside. Experiment with using timers during your workday. There are a lot of techniques that people have tried. Sometimes you might want to do like a 40-minute work session and 20-minute break, or maybe like me, I just like to just plow through for 3 hours and then take a longer break. There's different ways you can do it, but one of my favorite things to do with my phone, since it is in here with me and it's on Do Not Disturb, I put a timer. That way, it reminds me as soon as I need to be finishing up. So for example, if I have a 3-hour work session, I might put on my timer for 2 hours and 55 minutes. That way it reminds me 5 minutes before I need to be done to start wrapping things up. That way those last minute ideas I can get out. And I also keep a note app on my PC and on my phone that I can, in that moment, write down in text exactly what I didn't have time to finish. So if measure 271 needed this instrument, needed a French horn, but I didn't have time to do it, I don't want to lose the idea, so I literally type out measure 271, add French horn melody. This measure, do this measure, do this. That way it's logged and out of my brain, but I'm still honoring the times I've set aside for myself. And then I come back the next day or the next session, and that note is there. I know exactly what it's talking about, and I can move on from there as if no time was ever lost. Your assignment for lesson 1, write down your annual, quarterly, monthly, weekly, and daily work rhythms. Share this list with the community. I think this is going to be a very powerful assignment for you, especially if you've never done this before. So take the time, write these down, and even though this has nothing to do with music, I think this is a great starting spot, because if you can start to master these rhythms, you're going to be incredibly productive in your work time. And then as you do work on the rest of the assignments for this course, you're going to be focused and you're going to actually get it done. So can't wait to see what you share with the community.